Today we're going to be taking this antique tree trimmer and turning it into a knife. These dangerous metal hula hoops. These weird metal frisbees. These fire pit rings. Grandpa's barn ornaments. These get your elbows off the dinner table device. This shadow halo. These overly large and obnoxious wind chimes. After doing some research on the interwebs, I have discovered they're bandsaw blades. At any rate, let's get to making a knife. Yeah. So after cutting up one entire bandsaw blade, we now have an ornamental iron pine cone. It's kind of what it looks like. But we actually have 30 4-inch long pieces. So the next step is going to be cutting off all of the teeth to this so that it will sit flat. Now there's multiple ways to do this. I decided to go ahead and grab a handful of the bandsaw blades, clamp them together, and that way I could knock off the teeth to the blades. And it worked out pretty good. I still had to go back and individually clean up the sides of each piece, but it worked out all right. I'm also using 1084 for the dark steel in our patterned billet. And I bought some 2-inch wide stock, and I'm having to cut 1-inch strips out of it to match the width of the bandsaw blades. That was kind of time consuming and tedious, but once I get it done, all the pieces are cleaned up. We now have a really good billet of 30 layers. And for me, that's probably the most layers, at least starting out, that I've ever done. I think the closest one I got was maybe 24 layers. So you can see, because the bandsaw blades are pretty thin, we definitely get more layers to start. And that's only going to help us when we go to cut and restack, as we won't have to do it as many times. So it's just something to think about. The more layers you start with, the more layers you're going to get at the end. And as always, I go ahead and let the billet soak in some WD-40 before I throw it into the forge. We are almost ready for the first squish. It's been in there for 28 minutes. I like to dip it in WD-40 and put it straight into the forge, let it sit for roughly 30 minutes until it gets up to a good heat, and then bring it out and squish it. If you notice here too, I am only at 1900 degrees. So that's a little bit on the colder side for forge welding. But I put this in the video because a lot of people are probably going to have this style forge with a single burner, Venturi style, and it is difficult to get them up to 2000 degrees without adding a bunch of air, and you really don't want a whole bunch of air oxidizing the atmosphere while you're trying to forge weld. So we're almost at 30 minutes. I know lots of people do it lots of different ways, but I just thought I would share that. Let's go ahead and give it a squish. So after letting the billet soak for 30 minutes, and that's pretty typical no matter what kind of pattern welded billet I've got cooking, I let it soak for 30. I then go in for the first press, and I try to be super quick about it, throw it in the press, compress the layers, put a little bit of flux on it, and quickly get it back into the forge. So I do that maybe 3, 4, sometimes 5 times with these flattening dies before I move on to the drawing dies. And I've left this clip here at real time. I haven't changed the speed of it, just so you can kind of see what it looks like in real time. not only to show you how this log splitter forge press that I made, how it works and how fast it is, but also to show you that I'm really not moving a whole bunch of material at once. I'm taking these little itty bitty tiny bites with the drawing dies, and it really doesn't move material fast. It just moves it ever so slightly. But when you begin to stack that up over time, you can see how after I speed this clip up a little bit, all those little tiny movements eventually will end up drawing out the bar. So anyway, I just thought I would include that to kind of show you. Some people ask me about the log splitter press and if it's worth it and efficient. I think from my perspective, it absolutely is. I know without it, I would not be making Damascus. All right, now we're going to jump ahead a little bit just to save time in the video. I have since drawn this first billet out to a pretty good length, and I have went ahead and cut it into 5 pieces. And that's what I'm doing in this clip, is just cleaning up those 5 pieces. Then off camera, once we get them cleaned up, I weld them back together and go back to the forge for the second round of forge welding. Now, each one of these pieces had 30 layers in it. I was able to cut out 5 pieces and restack it. So we are now at a total of 150 layers on this billet. I also added some 1080 back in between those 5 layers. So technically it's 154 layers if you want to be precise. Now I'm just taking the time to redo the entire process, and that's really what it is. It's a rinse and repeat type of deal. And that's kind of the name of the game, especially for random pattern Damascus, or if you're trying to get a higher layer count. That's kind of the name of the game, is just continuing the steps all over again. So let's fast forward a little bit more, and you can see here we are back at the anvil for the second round. I went ahead and stretched this bar back out pretty much as long as I could make it without making the bar too thin. But once we spent a little bit of time at the anvil flattening it out, we're ready to either make a knife out of it or chop it up and do one more round of forge welding. And taking a look at this, I've got plenty of steel to make several blades at this point, but we're only at 150 layers, and I thought it'd be really cool to continue the layer count. So I decide to clean it up and cut it up into more pieces for a second go around at forge welding. Technically 3 rounds of forge welding. So that's precisely what I do. I go ahead and cut off the ends, and then I'm able to get 4 pieces out of this 154 layer bar. Now that I have 154 layer chunks, I'm ready to restack them. So I take a little bit of time cleaning them up and prepare them to be welded up for the third forge rounding session. Before I stick them on there, I was really curious as to what 154 layers would look like, at least on the surface. And here you can see that is exactly what 154 layers look like. It's not as impressive as I thought it was. It's certainly got a lot of contrast going on, especially because I haven't heat treated it or polished it high, but you can definitely see the alternating steels. It's just not as much as I thought. So I've decided to go ahead and forge weld one more time. I have 4 pieces at 154 layers. I'm not going to be doing all 4 chunks. I'm going to set one aside for a later project, but we will be doing 3 of the chunks. So if my math is correct, that will bring us up to a total of 462 layers. All right, so here we are again back at the forge press for the final forge weld and the final time of drawing out this billet. And I know that the last 10 minutes of this video has really just been shots of this, trying to forge weld the different layers. And I'll be honest, knife making, especially Damascus, isn't all glamorous. It's not all fireballs and beautiful Persian daggers. There's a lot of behind-the-scenes hard work that's really just not that interesting. And if you ask anybody who makes knives, I will bet they would agree with me. So instead of continuing to show you each shot of drawing this thing out a little tiny bit, we're going to just go ahead and jump to where I've got the billet redrawn out at least to the right length to make the knife that we're trying to make. And if I can't make this video entertaining, which is hard to do with the same shot over and over again, I can at least try to make it somewhat educational. And I hope that I have provided you with at least a little bit of education and maybe some entertainment. That's always a plus. Anyway, we're wrapping this up here, getting it cleaned up with this awesome cup, and we're moving forward. We are now to the point where we are ready to finally start making a blade out of these bandsaw blades. All right, so now that we've taken just a few minutes to remove the forge scale on our billet, we're looking pretty good. I wanted to stop for a second and talk about what I use to remove forge scale. So if you are also in the knife making game or blacksmithing or whatever, you know that forge scale can be tough. This is by far the best that I have found to remove it. This is an aluminum oxide grinding wheel, and it's made for metal. It's very rough, and it just works super well to remove the forge scale. Now you can see it doesn't remove all of it, and all these little areas that are left behind are actually indents from the forge press, so it's not going to remove all of it. But to take the time to get rid of this much with a regular flap disc is insane. Here is a shot of what a regular new flap disc looks like, and when you try to use one of these, your flap disc will just get clogged up. And the difference in between these is just tremendous. This feels super smooth, and really it just kind of burns and clogs up the flap disc. So these aren't super great for forge scale. Now there's other things like this, and this is kind of a ceramic disc, and you have to have a backing plate to use this. But I would say for me, this is probably my second best, or the second go-to if I don't have one of these wheels. And then probably the flap disc. But anyway, these are super cheap. They're like 15 bucks. And I've had this one for a while. It has ground many, many billets. I will say it does work a lot better at slower speeds. I have this $15 Amazon special, and it is variable speed. And I just run it at about a medium, and it works really good. Anyway, I'll try to put a link in the description for these if you're interested in picking one up. Before we go and cut out the profile on this, I think it's a good idea, especially if you're not the one designing the knives, is to mock it up. And that's exactly what I've done. I've just cut out his design on a little piece of wood. And that way, I can actually put it in my hand, see what it feels like. Is the handle ergonomics comfortable? Is it going to work with the blade shape? Those sorts of things. So this is going to work pretty decent. Now that I have it in my hand, I can see kind of what it feels like. And I think it's going to work out good. It's got the 3-finger area here, and then kind of a split for your pinky. And this being a little bit smaller works well in the back of your hand. Also, too, if you wanted to hold it backwards, it kind of gives you a good grip like that. So anyway, it's something that I like to do even if I'm the one designing the knives, I like to still do this because I've spent a lot of time creating this billet, and if I was unsure of the profile and I just went in willy-nilly and just cut it up and then realized, oh, this is super uncomfortable, then that would stink. I wouldn't be able to undo that mistake. So anyway, for what it's worth, just keep that in mind. It's always good to just mock something up and kind of test fit it in your hand. Now that we know the blade profile is good and the handle is going to be comfortable, I'm ready to cut out the actual profile with the angle grinder. And we're ready to turn this flat rectangle of steel into a blade. While we're watching me cut it out and profile it, it is a great opportunity for me to talk about today's sponsor of the video. Today's sponsor is Housemade Industrial. Go check them out at housemade.us. They have tons of great gear for your bladesmithing/blacksmithing shop. And whether you're in a killer shop or a crappy backyard lawnmower shed like myself, they got what you need. Personally, I bought the Generation 5 Revolution grinder, which you see me using here. This machine has been an absolute game changer for me and can be for you too. Definitely go check it out. They have tons of cool gear. I highly suggest picking up something from them today. So there we go. We have one solid chunk of steel ready to be turned in to a killer blade. And the video, I realize, is already getting pretty lengthy. So I would at least like to go in and give this a quick test etch just to see what the pattern is going to look like. And then in the next episode, I will be finishing this out and slapping a handle on it to complete the blade. I'm still waiting on a special piece of wood that the customer would like me to use, so I got to get a hold of him and get that prepared for the knife. It is still relatively thick. I've left a lot of meat on this thing, and I think that it will be a pretty meaty knife because I know the guy and I know he'll be using and abusing this one, and I think it would be good to leave it thick and put a really nice hollow grind on this, kind of a tall hollow grind, so that it can be slicey but still have a lot of meat behind the edge. Anyway, I went ahead and ran it across the 120 grit belt just to clean it up. Now, it's not perfect. It obviously still has some work to be done to polish it, but I want to, at the very least, get an idea of what the pattern will look like. You also have to consider, too, that this is not heat treated, and I have not ground the bevels in just yet. So the pattern will definitely change some. I'm also planning on putting a fuller in this, so that'll definitely bring out more layers and add some extra character to the blade. But let me run inside, etch this thing, and then I'll come right back and we'll get to see at least kind of what it will look like. All right, so here we are in the kitchen and we are etching the blade. Let's have a quick look. It's kind of hard to see because you can't really see a whole lot of the layers going on with it not being heat treated or polished, but if you look closely you can see some really bold lines, and then you can also see some really fine lines in between the bold lines. So there's definitely a lot of layers in here. It's just kind of hard to see at the moment. I would imagine too that as we grind into this, we're going to be grinding into more of the dense layers. You can kind of see some here where you've got the layers are tighter together. And like I said, because it's not heat treated or ground really well, it's going to be hard to pick up all those layers. But this would at least give you somewhat of an idea of what it could potentially look like. So that is where we're going to leave it for this episode. That just means you're going to have to come back for the next episode to see what this thing looks like when it is all fully done. It's going to be awesome. Well, I know it ain't a whole lot to be looking at just yet, but at least you can kind of see the layers. And I think it's going to be really cool when we continue making this thing. Grinding in the bevels will absolutely bring out more of the dense layers, so I'm looking forward to that. Hopefully you guys learned something and at the very least enjoyed the video. I appreciate you guys watching, and I will be putting out a part 2 to this for finishing this blade up. I think it's an interesting design, pretty cool profile, and it will make a heck of a blade. I hope to see you guys in the next episode where we finish this thing out. Appreciate you guys watching as always, and I'll catch you in the next one. Yeah. Peace.